Namaste. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So if anyone was in the earlier class, as you know, we got interrupted. I think I sent you an email. There was not a Wi-Fi problem. It was an unexpected, the microchip card in the camera was full. I didn't know that. So anyway, we got that resolved, and hopefully things will be okay. Anyway, so let us start with the chanting of a few verses in Drg Drsya Viveka. So let us start with verse number 20, and then we will do 22, 23 and 24. So 20, 22, 23 and 24. Number 20. Asti bhati priyam rupam nama chetyam shapanchakam adyatrayam brahma rupam jagat rupam tato dvayam. And number 22. Upeksha nama rupe dve satchidananda tatparaha samadhim sarvada kuryat hridaye vathava bahihi savikalpo nirvikalpaha samadhir dvividho hridi drishya shabda nuvedhena savikalpah punardvidha kamadya chittaga drishya tatsakshittvena chetanam dhyaye drisyanuviddhoyam samadhi savikalpakaha. So again, number 24, because it's a new verse, so let's pronounce it twice. Kamadya chittaga drishyaha tatsakshittvena chetanam dhyaye drisyanuviddhoyam samadhi savikalpakaha. Okay. So this is a very good text. I think it lays out the complete spectrum of the process going from being a samsari, being a normal person who is beset with the issues of life, immortal, the one who is beset with mortality. Start with that and reaches all the way up to the door of immortality. This is just a phenomenal. Just if you think about it, there is nothing like this available anywhere in the world, where you are taken in the lap of the teaching, who lifts you up from where we are. There are some variations in people's lives, some are happier than others and so on, but everyone is completely beset with all the limitations of life, including the birth of the body, the death of the body, all the issues relating to the world, diseases, changes, uncertainties, fears, all those kinds of things. It takes you all the way up to something which is a complete freedom from all of them. And this is a remarkable achievement, really, a remarkable process. It's not available anywhere. That's the beauty of it. And we are not as though we are proud of it or as though we are saying, my gosh, see how superior we are. But I wish this would be available someplace else, but it isn't. What are we going to do? Or at least it's there in a very reliable fashion in this sampradaya, which is communicated from teacher to teacher to teacher, and overcomes the natural doubt in people's minds. Really? Is that possible? Well, it is not only possible, it is done. It's a done deal, and you just have to really understand it. So I think the Drg Drsya Viveka is one of the most beautiful texts that gives you a broad summary of this whole process. Doesn't go into a lot of detail that you have to discover later, but at least it's a excellent review of the entire process of going from down here to up here. So in that process, I think the foundational verse, which I have mentioned before also, is the verse number 20, which says, Asti bhati priyam rupam nama chaiti ansha panchakam. So it says, if you look at anything in this life, you find that it is made up of 3 constant factors and 2 changing factors. The constant factors are asti bhati priyam. The fact that it is there is a presence. There is a presence, and there is an awareness of the presence. And also it is very pleasant. So priyam means something which is attractive, something very beautiful, something which is full of ananda. So this vastu, which is endowed with truth and existence, with knowledge, and with ananda, is the constant factor. And then superimposed upon that are apparent changes, nama rupa, name and form. So this takes a little while for us to understand and to grasp and to see the benefit of doing that, because the question is, by looking at the whole world in these 5 factors, dividing them into an unchanging 3 and a changing 2, what do I gain out of it? Is this just an academic thing, or is it something more into it for me? And of course the question is, it is much more into it for me. And that process needs to be understood. And so that process consists of first understanding the constituents of it, the various elements of what this truth is, which is what we've been doing all the way up to starting from the rupam, drishyam, lochanam, drik, and now udeti na astameti esha, etc., Drg Drsya, and culminating in this foundational verse, asti bhati priyam, number 20. So that part is done, along with some clearing of doubts and so on. Although this particular text It doesn't go into a lot of the clearing of the doubts. It is simply tells you what it is and relies on you to then inquire further and to remove your doubts and all that. All that is done. But then this transition now is what is there for me now begins. And so this is the process of transitioning to a meditation based on the truth. And so this meditation is now described first and hopefully then done along with it, which we will do today. We are going to first spend some time in describing the fundamental elements of meditation and then actually do the meditation to see how the fundamentals of meditation benefit me. Now, that process we will start. So a few things before we do the meditation. One thing to keep in mind, and especially this is an appropriate time to reflect upon the various forms of meditation. And so I think I may have spent some time in the last class, but even if I did, let me give a quick revision of an examination of the different kinds of meditation and what the Vedantic meditation means. So fundamentally, if you look at it, really all schools of spiritual thoughts, all schools, I am not talking about religiosity, not the theology. Leave aside the theological aspect of it, although that is related many times to the spiritual aspect of it. But if you just look at the spiritual components of all alternative schools of thought, more or less they depend upon quietening your mind. So now let us look into the yogic school of thought, the yoga school, which is one of the best out of any of the other ones. There are some differences in practice in yoga itself, but more or less the yogic principles go a systematic approach of quietening your mind. And so what it really means is, the yoga means is that you are alone, and you systematically go through one step at a time by quietening the mind. So pranayama, dharana, dhyanam, etc., up to samadhi. This is one school of thought. And so Patanjali's ultimate point is chitta vritti nirodha, that any kind of variation in your mind you should just eliminate. So you just have a single pointed attention towards yourself. This is the samadhi that Patanjali says and yoga says. So this is one method. Now, quite frankly, if you want to look at just from a standpoint of contrast, what you find is that there are people who say that not yoga but bhoga gives you happiness. So yoga is supposed to give you peace of mind and happiness. by single-minded samadhi. Sure. Then the other people who say, but I can get the same thing by bhoga. Bhoga means experiencing good things. Food, music, sexual pleasure. All of those kinds of things are called bhoga. And yes, I am not, just like they can argue, I'm just giving you the argument, that the yoga school also allows you to be in samadhi some of the time. You're not in samadhi all the time. Sooner or later you're going to get hungry, thirsty. You're going to get up outside of the samadhi. And so how long are you going to be in samadhi? Instead, just enjoy life. And every time sure there are portions where I'm not enjoying, but just like in yoga also, just like you're not doing samadhi, I'm also not enjoying, but that's okay. I can go from one episode of enjoyment to another episode of enjoyment. This is the bhoga. So in some way there are two competing, overstating it a little bit, but two competing contrasts of gaining happiness. So in the middle of all this, one can say, well, what do the Vedantins say? What do we say? Because we are following a certain structure, certain teaching, and so on. This is the Vedanta, the Vedas. So what do they say? So as you know by now, I'm just consolidating this. It's nothing new. This is just to make sure that you are clear about exactly what the process we are following is. We say both of them are not necessary. You can gain inner peace and happiness by following a discriminative inquiry into yourself. Viveka. Viveka means discrimination, means discriminative inquiry. Leading up to a discrimination. Really? How is that possible? One can ask. I can see the yogic system, I can see the bhogic system, both of them. The yoga I may not be very conversant with, except for those of us that have been studying yoga for a while. And bhoga we are all very conversant with. Every day we enjoy through the bhoga. But what is this discrimination and how is that possible to do? So there we say, and so this is the foundation of both the teaching as well as, if you can call it, the practice of Vedantic meditation. Both the teaching itself, and so I'm careful in avoiding the terms theory and practice. So Swami Dayanandji was very clear about this part. He says, don't call it theory and practice. The theory and practice set of this is a set. Theory practice is a two different aspects of, it's a set. That set is appropriate for something to be done. Something to be done, there it is appropriate to call it theory and practice. Like for instance, you can take a cooking class. You can just take a cooking class. Just the other day, my wife was telling, she was watching TV and I was just reading close to her. And she says, very interesting recipe. So I said, what? She says, this woman on the Today Show in the morning was showing how to make chocolate covered almonds with less sugar and so on, but you have to do it yourself. You have to assemble all the things. So I peeked over, and it really does look very interesting, how to make dark chocolate covered almonds. So this is all good food. Almonds are very good food. Dark chocolate is also good food. And so you don't have a lot of negative ingredients in there. There is some sugar, but it's very minimized. And anyway, so that's the recipe. So now you know the recipe, which is called theory. But you haven't really enjoyed it until you turn that theory into practice. So this set of words called theory and practice only applies for things to be done. Similarly, if you want to become a very expert mechanic, you first have to understand what are the parts of a car. And then you have to start practicing fixing cars. And after a while, you become an expert. So similarly, that does not apply to our knowledge. Knowledge is different. In knowledge also, the effects are similar, but the methods are different. How? In knowledge also, you have something which you read from a book or listen to someone talk to you, and yet you have not yet gained the benefit of what is being talked about. Similar to theory and practice. So, for example, we say, this is what Shravanam, this is what up to verse number 20 is. It talks about Viveka, that listen, things are mixed up. So it's like electricity and the appliance all mixed up together. So if you are electricity and you don't know you are electricity and you are enjoying your presence in the appliance and the appliance breaks, so you can get unhappy because your identity is with the appliance, not with yourself. This is exactly what happens in our lives. It's a beautiful example, one we should really think about it over and over again. So there is a certain presentation of this material. Now, just by presentation of the material, you don't get the benefit right away, just like the theory and practice. But in that manner, what you need to do is not to do anything, but to let this vidya, this knowledge sink into yourself. And so here I think an analogy would be more appropriate, which is that when you are eating something, so you are actually eating good food for two reasons. Okay? If I can oversimplify it. One is to remove your hunger. The other one is to gain from the nutrition of the food so you can stay healthy. These are the two benefits of eating. Okay? Now, it's very possible that you can eat something and immediately satisfy your hunger. And here I can digress for just a minute. What is said is that in Vedanta is very much like eating, because it's not as though your hunger is not being addressed until you have finished eating. So suppose you are hungry and you are eating, just from an Indian standpoint, some rotis, chapatis, or rice for that matter. Now, as you start eating, you take some portions of the roti or rice, some portion of your hunger is being addressed. It's not as though everything is you're still basically hungry, but less hungry. So it can slowly build up to a point where afterwards you say, done. I cannot eat anymore, I'm done. So in this particular case, the first factor of the advantage of eating has been satisfied, which is that your hunger has been now addressed. But your nutritional value of the food will not be addressed until you absorb it in your body. That absorption will take a much longer time. And it has to be done right, and it has to be done correctly. And you cannot overeat, because that will make you sick. You cannot undereat. And you have to eat the right ingredients. So there the two factors are different. So in the case of hunger, you can eat some ice cream, and your hunger is satisfied, but there is no nutrition. This is not good for you. You can have a little bit of ice cream, but if you have a whole full meal full of ice cream 3 times a day, you're not going to survive very long. So the point there is that similarly is the knowledge. So the knowledge is not theory and practice, it is a sense of absorption. All this is relevant for our meditation. I'm giving you some extra inputs on that. So the knowledge is like absorption. It's like eating. How? Because if you attend these classes, you feel some good. This is like eating. You are responding to your hunger. You're looking for some guidance in life, and if the teacher seems to be credible, hopefully well informed, and is able to communicate, you feel good about it. Yeah, I'm learning something interesting. This sounds good. This is like your hunger for information and knowledge is being addressed. But to get the full benefit. Now, even I can go back to it for a minute on the first one, that doing this Shravanam, the Viveka, that there is a Drg and a Drsya, the Drg doesn't change, the Drsya keeps changing, finally culminating in this verse, Asti Bhati Priyam Rupam Nama Ansha Panchakam Adyatrayam Brahmanupam Jagat Rupam Tatodvayam. This is the culmination of the knowledge. And knowledge that hopefully you will feel, wow, this is good. Something is good. But even at that point, you haven't really felt the full benefit of it yet. It sounds interesting, sounds good, and it's appealing to me, but the absorption has not taken place. And really speaking, your long-term health and longevity and goodness is not just by fulfilling your hunger, but to really get nutritious food where you can feel I'm doing good. So in that sense, the absorption of the knowledge is compared to eating, not theory and practice. So anyway, this is what Swami Dayananda ji, my teacher, used to spend a lot of time explaining at different times, at different places. And so we should really see that. And oftentimes we think about that, that we think of knowledge as being theory and practice. So there is nothing to practice, but there is something to absorb. And I remember a lot of discussions with people. They will say, you're just reading books. How is that going to really help you? This is completely academic. And to a certain extent, they are right. But only to a certain extent. They are not completely right. Because the process of, you cannot absorb the food until you eat it, isn't it? It's like somebody telling you, you're just eating, you're not absorbing. And technically they are right. Why? Because you can gulp down some food, and the food hasn't really permeated your body yet, and it can be thrown out immediately. That's true. So it's like somebody saying, oh, no, you're just eating. But I have to eat first before I absorb it. So in that manner, the absorption of knowledge, and the absorption of knowledge means, as we will do today itself, applying in that sense and seeing the beauty of that as a truthful representation of who I am. This is what it really means. Right now I'm missing some factors. I don't have all the factors. And Shastra supplies all the factors to you and says, here's how you need to look at yourself. Do not ignore the wealth of your beingness, your knowledge about yourself. You're ignoring it. Exactly the same thing as a very rich person who never touches the bank account and lives a miserly life even though you have the money. That's exactly what our situation is. Now, if we don't know that I have money, that's another matter. But even if I find out that I have lots of money in the bank, not to be able to spend it is not good. In fact, I remember Swami Dayananda used to say this. He says, if you look at all my foolish ways of looking at things, there are two that stand out in his mind. One is miserliness, and the other one is jealousy. He says, if you look at all other emotional responses that we have in our life, like disappointment or excitement or even anger, leave aside all those kinds of things. They all have certain reasonable basis for me to act that way. So I am disappointed because I was hoping that it will be like this, and it isn't. And so Ishvara has made disappointment as a reasonable response to doing things. Similarly, anger, which is nothing but an extreme form of disappointment, kind of like a shock, etc. All those are reasonable. But if you look at all of them, there are two that stand out as being most unreasonable. One of them is miserliness. And miserliness means you have it but you don't utilize it. What's the logic in doing that? The logic can be, I'm afraid that I may lose it, so I'm just going to keep it. Maybe. But even beyond that, if we don't share, we don't utilize it for ourselves, leave aside for someone else. How logical is that? The other one is jealousy. Swamiji used to say jealousy is a very interesting thing, because even if you are happy, supposing you go to a social get together, and you go there, you're very happy, everything is fine, everything in your life is going well, you're very satisfied with how things are, where you are, your friends, your family, your money, and whatever it is, your health, everything seems to be going well. Then you meet somebody at the person, and you find out that this person was attending college in the same days that you were.